The idea of a shot has been around since the creation of the first camera. Cameras were used to mimic the human eye and the way we view things. But what makes a shot work? What makes a good shot?
I believe is a long shot because you're catching the whole frame.
I believe what makes a good shot is close-ups because it gives a clear visual of what the artist is about and who they're performing to.
I think what makes a good shot is the realism of the shot.
I think what makes a good shot is being in focus and like having a subject within the frame, so like just a perfect, like somewhere within the middle of the frame.
It has, like, everything has to work together.
A shot refers to the moment a camera starts rolling until the moment it stops. Within that, angles and other elements are manipulated to express a desired emotion. Good refers to something to be desired or approved of. For this educational piece, we have met up with some of the industry's professionals from various walks of life to see if the idea of a good shot is universal and what each of their professions require to make a shot work. We decided to follow the film structure around the subject, from getting the subject ready to the subject, lighting, camera, and then action, and finally editing the full piece. We spoke to makeup, fashion, models, subjects, camera, sound, lighting, and finally editing.
The thing that I think makes a really good shot is not just the technical ability of the photographer with the lighting, camera angles, composition, but the energy and passion that the subject brings to the shot. So you might not be the best looking person, but if you bring a lot of personality into the picture, I think that can create some of the strongest shots as opposed to just being someone who's pretty.
Okay, the 5 things that make a good shot. Number 1, you've got to get a clear vision from either the director or fashion designer that you're working with. So that can be sketching out face charts and mood boards and some sort of visual imagery. Number 2 is to work with costume and see what sort of textures and colours they've got going on. Number 3 is then to create a flawless hair and makeup. Number 4 is to work with a photographer. You've got to check lighting, see how it looks on camera because it looks really different to the eye. And number 5 is a makeup artist. You've then got to step back and just observe and then just only go in if needed. You've got to kind of be seen and not heard at that point because you've done your job. If shots go wrong, they go wrong right from the start. There's been a miscommunication with you and the director, you and the fashion designer, and you've assumed you know what they want and it hasn't been clear enough.
Of course, there's composition and there's technical things to think about, but I think it's really about the emotion for me. What makes a bad shot, I think, is when it is overtly referential or copying other photographers, unless there's some sort of integrity to it, like it's an obvious homage to a photographer. I just think a lot of people these days refer too much to other people's work rather than trying to think of something original.
The shot for when you're talking directly to camera in a studio context, the mid-shot, reasonably close, gives you a much better connection, particularly early in a bulletin, with the person you're talking to. I think if it's too wide, especially early on, you can sometimes feel a little bit distant, whereas just getting a nice tight mid-shot, first couple of stories, directors like to do their own thing after that, but I like early on in the bulletin to get that sort of face-to-face connection with the viewer in a studio context. The illusion is that you are there in the corner of their living room and you're talking directly to them in a group of maybe 1 or 2 people. You're not sort of declaiming, you're not making a speech, you're not addressing a large crowd. Even though you are talking to several million people at the same time, you're talking sort of individually and almost intimately to 1 or 2 people at a time. And that's sort of the great illusion of TV.
What makes a good shot? I think when it's a presenter on screen and you really feel that they've got a connection with you, and normally that's because it's a mid-shot, And I think actually sometimes that's down to the presenter as well, being genuine and actually authentic and actually engaging with you. But I guess it's about the lights capturing them in the right way, not putting them in a shadow. So the light's kind of illuminating that person, so it's bringing out all of their best features and making you want to see them, and really just putting them in a good light so that you're connecting with them as an audience member. In terms of being a presenter, when I see shots of myself back and I think my face is too shiny, my hair's out of place, and not on purpose out of place like it is now, that kind of thing distracts me. So I think when I'm watching other programmes and I'm watching other presenters, I'm thinking the same thing, you know, they need to neaten that up or neaten this up. I don't mind shots having lots of things in the action, but do it on purpose. So it's been brought to my attention that I'm a bit of a stickler for attention to detail.
Okay, in my profession as a presenter, I think what makes a good shot initially is the establishing shot, where you can see the presenter in the context of where he or she is working in. So if you're in a bar, or you're in a club, or you're in a gallery, a shot that's wide enough so the presenter is established as to where they are. And beyond that, just really a bit closer in, maybe to just up to the waistline, where you can see the body language and the presenter's talking straight to the camera, and you get a feel for what they're saying. I think it gives the audience a sense that they're close to that presenter, because when you see that framing, you know that to be that close to that person, you'd have to be maybe just a couple of feet away. So you feel that presenter is in your living room and they're just talking to you and it feels quite intimate. But then the shots when you get a little bit closer, when they're explaining things, you get more of the body language, the facial features, and that's quite nice when you're talking intimately about a particular part of a show or a particular item that you're talking about. What makes a bad shot? I mean, there are all the obvious things. Strange framing where the background is kind of grabbing your interest rather than the person talking. Blurry or weird shots, but that's just, you know, poor camera work. But I think what makes a poor shot sometimes is those extreme close-ups. They drive me crazy because you're talking and they film you, and when you watch the show back, sometimes they're so close to your face. On those giant TV screens, it's like you're some kind of ogre that's inside somebody's living room.
I think one of the key things that makes a good shot is connected to framing, the rule of thirds, possibly foregrounding items so that you create depth. Probably the Leonardo da Vinci idea of the golden triangle. He worked out that there's a movement across an image that follows a triangle, and that if you want to direct the eye to something, you always put it on the diagonal line of the triangle. There's a sort of subsidiary bit where a second triangle comes in, and at the point where those two triangles intersect is the point of ultimate interest within a picture, which happens normally to be roughly in the middle of the picture. So there's a kind of logic to it anyway. They often don't realise they're seeing it, but they react to it, and they'll react to placements within it. Certain placements work with the psychology of the eye, so the eye moves across the screen in a certain way, so you place objects within that so that they stand out, and again the audience don't realise that it's standing out, but that's what they're getting. Poor framing. You see an awful lot of poor framing. Too much looking room, stopping room, not there when people are moving. Often the important thing in a frame is cut off, or it's just not got enough space around it to sort of see it in its context. And I guess also my ultimate and big no-no is handheld when you don't need to handhold, because all that means is the shot is shaky, and shaky shots just wobble and make the audience feel queasy, and they just disturb.
There's something called the rule of thirds, so you'd position the subject if you can imagine some imaginary lines, there was two lines vertical down and two lines going across, and it's where those two lines meet is where you would stick an object. I think it's more comfortable to the eye for the viewer. Slightly overexposed or slightly underexposed, focusing is wrong, maybe there's too much headroom, not enough looking room. So there's quite a lot of things that can make a shot look bad.
think the main issue I have with framing is actually subdividing the image into 3 parts. For instance, if I was framing an interview, the weighting of the image would look comfortable to the eye if the subject was placed in the corner third of that image. As I say, imagine breaking that image, that frame, up into 3 distinct parts. It just seems to be an innate human thing. Deep within all of us, we have this just fundamental understanding of what is right in terms of framing.
The important thing to me is, when looking at a shot, is to think about what elements of that can be enhanced by 3D. Make sure that it's going to work in 3D, it's going to be acceptable in 3D, and not cause any issues with the viewer, it's not going to be uncomfortable to look at, and it's going to be creatively in tune with what the director's vision is for that project. If you make something in 2D and put it out in 3D, but it hasn't got 3D embedded in the narrative in the way that the story is being told, then you're creating something which is worse than watching it in 2D. I would choose to do it in 3D because it's going to immerse my audience in the content that I'm shooting. It's going to make them have more of a sense of presence, of emotional engagement with the content. So I think that 3D can be most effective in certain genres of programs. If I'm shooting in 3D, I'll tend to err towards diagonal framing and not straight on framing. So in other words, I wouldn't put the camera straight onto something. I'd put it at a diagonal. So if, for example, if you're doing a music shoot, then I wouldn't, the classic view is, camera is pointed directly at stage, and that is effectively like a master shot, as though you're in the middle of the audience looking at and that's great in 2D. To me, it makes everything look flat. I'll put the camera off to one side, which gives you a diagonal framing. You naturally get perspective cues that reinforce the stereoscopic, and you get more of a feeling of engagement with the content if it's not being directed at you so much. It makes you feel like you're part of the audience, and I think you feel more engaged with the content. You have flat 3D if you don't have the cameras separated by the right amount, or you can have exaggerated 3D, which looks really wrong if somebody moves. You can have 3D that breaks people's brains, that really is not very comfortable to watch if you've produced something that is not viewable in a naturalistic kind of way. I don't mean that it all has to be shot as natural, but it's very difficult to shoot a long telephoto and make 3D that works. So I think it restricts the kind of lens shot combinations that you might use to be effective. Don't use narrow depth of field at all. That's it, I shoot everything at f8, f11, to keep everything in focus, and use other cues to direct the viewer's attention, like lighting or action, and not narrow depth of field. And I think that's part of what's different about 3D filmmaking, that you need to kind of plan from the beginning about how you're going to tell the story, and then what you need to do to make that work in 3D.
You are telling the audience how to look at things, and that's already from your angle. In my case, when I really like the close-ups. When I feel that I'm really close to someone, I go to extreme close-ups, and I like details, facial expressions. For me, with documentaries, the closer you are to reality, the better. So I think a good shot, to be honest, I think it's a shot that is able to express a feeling, to say something. You need to say something with each shot. I think whenever you look at a shot, you're seeing an image through someone else's perspective.
Well, depending on what that image is, as to how you frame it and what you want the viewer to feel. If it's like dramas and comedies and stuff like that, if it's scripted, then you have to film according to the script and what's required. Anything that has disturbed the viewer, And that could be anything really. Too many shadows in the background, the way it's lit, the sound that plays a part, because people forget the sound. If the shot is actually fantastic, but the sound is poor, then people don't like the shot.
I think a good shot is a shot that translates what's written on the script to motion pictures. So there's no good shot. It's all in context, isn't it? It's all sort of part of telling a story. So a lot of shots are just almost like a paragraph to say something. And so you can't say, well, I like this shot out of context, because it might be beautiful or exciting, but if it's not telling a story in a particular way, then it's not a good shot. If the lighting doesn't fit the story, then there will be no feeling. You know, whatever takes you out of the story is a bad shot. You know, in a comedy, say, everything's light and happy, and then all of a sudden you see one shot where it's much darker, or the color is desaturated, and then it goes right back into light and happy. It's jarring.
From an ITV News point of view, I think most people would agree what we do is tell a human story very well. So what I would look for is people and how it is affecting people. So of course you need wide shots that show the extent of the devastation. But what I think is quite a hallmark of the way ITV News tells a story is close-ups. So faces with dust on them, with dishevelled hair, a tear, cutaway of a mother's hands as she's holding a baby, or an aid worker who is, you know, shaking as they're trying to get a syringe ready for an injection, anything like that. It's the little details that turn, you know, a general scene into something quite poignant that people at home can feel they can almost touch. Real sort of looks of either anxiety or relief or despair. So emotional shots, I suppose, sort of covers everything. But close-ups aimed in focus long enough. I suppose I'd say the bad shots are what we'd expect everybody to get. So it's difficult because you'd say, well, that's the core stuff that we need, and obviously we do, but that, I suppose, tells you that a camera operator needs to be intuitive and instinctive about what they're doing, and knowing when they can take the camera off some chief executive who's making a speech and actually go to his flunky in the background who's looking worried and talking to his, and you know, that gives you much more about what he's saying than what he's actually saying. So yeah, nothing too conventional, and shots that don't actually mean much. So being selective, but I think instinctive is quite a good quality for a camera operator to know actually in the final edit this will be something that will actually make people pause and think that's a story that actually affects me either emotionally or personally or financially or whatever.
What is going to draw someone's eye to a particular focus point? I think what a lot of people don't think about is what it's going to sound like in that area. So what are you going to do? Are you going to shoot something which is near an air conditioning unit, or are you going to move further away? It might not be your preferred shot, but if the sound is so much clearer, then I think that's a really important thing. And you know, it's you can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears. When your camera settings are set up poorly and then you've tried to fix something in post, spend the time to actually get your settings correct in the first place. And if you are using multiple cameras, you know, make sure they're all on the same settings, that you've got the same ISO, white balance, all that. It's much better to have it right at the beginning rather than having to spend extra time in processing later.
If
If the audience can relate to a song, they're going to be more in tune with it and therefore more likely to listen to the other elements. If nobody can relate to a song, then it's just a piece of music, it's just a sound, and those are the kind of things that are a bit more throwaway. You know, they're the one-hit wonders, the club joints that you forget about in a month. The things that stick around for longer are always those with substance and things that people can relate to their lives in some way. What would make a bad shot would be polishing a turd. So, referring back to the foundation, if you're chucking loads and loads of sound effects, sweeps, all of these auto-tune vocals and all this crazy stuff on top of something that's fundamentally not right from the beginning, then you know you're gonna lose out, and it's never gonna sound as good as something that's a lot more developed and a lot more thought out.
For me, what makes a good shot or a good performance is a combination of different things. Fluidity in playing, so that I'm well rehearsed and I'm well prepared, which means I'm confident, that I feel good about myself physically as well. So, you know, I got my hair did, I got my face did, I'm ready to rock, that I'm on a big stage, all the extras of the stage, so you've got the lights, the video, all of that, that your artist who you're playing with is vibed, that the band you're playing with has got a good connection, and that the audience is kind of feeling what you're doing. So it's a real combination of all of those elements that for me make a good shot. When you just don't kind of capture the audience, when it works, the audience is with you. You take them on a journey, they take you on a journey. It's a very joined experience, which makes it so special.
It's as a still, how would that work? One frame of it, what is it going to tell you about that person, that thing? So for me, a good shot is something that tells you a story in a frame. If you can capture that, then it's always a good start, because then that's the beautiful thing about photography. You only get one frame and it speaks to you, it speaks volumes. So poorly lit, badly framed, and makes the first thing about a bad shot is it tells the viewer, don't listen to what's going on. Even if you don't understand what makes a good or a bad shot, you'll know something's wrong because you won't be focusing on what's going on in front of you and the whole point.
As you can see from the short educational piece, in the wide world of creative industries, there are multiple areas that collaborate to create the idea of a good shot. But from this small sample of industry professionals, we have given you the basic elements of making a good shot and a fruitful career in the various areas of the industry. We have also highlighted the elements of a shot that could hinder you, i.e. a bad shot, which will make you stand out for the wrong reasons. So on that note, go forth and be fruitful.
I think it's the energy of the person in the shot that really makes it for me.
So always do face charts, always do trials.
I just think a lot of people these days refer too much to other people's work.
So you keep that eye contact and you keep that sort of direct speech between two people almost, even if it is only one way.
So there's not always a need to do too many close-ups, just like headshots and just further out.
I like to, no matter what depth of field, no matter what is in focus, I always like to foreground something, I always like to have something behind my subject.
The more you do camera work, the more you become accustomed to it. It sort of becomes second nature in you.
Field, particularly fashionable at the moment, of course, is to have a relatively shallow depth of field.
I'm looking at you, that's out of focus, but if I do that, it's sharp. So you can't use that as a cue. You have to make this dimmer, or you have to not have it in shot, or you have to move the camera so both are in focus.
So that nothing in the background or anything that's happening around it actually distracts the viewer from that content.
We're used to seeing women soft, with no edges and no light coming from behind them.
I think that if you are a sound recordist, you should be making sure that you always capture enough room tone to be able to fill gaps later on in the edit.
if you don't have the right song, you don't have the right performance of that song, then nothing else matters.
When it works, the audience is with you. You take them on a journey, they take you on a journey.
Obvious things about well framed, in focus, long enough.
It's as a still, how would that work? One frame of it, what is it going to tell you about that person, that thing?